Hello and a very warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay, and welcome to, as you can see, not the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar. I've done some renovations, but sadly they haven't been quite this spectacular. We are sitting 234 meters above Sandton, so about 6 kilometers above Cape Town, and sitting very happily in Alto 234, which is the seen and be seen spot in Johannesburg at the moment. It takes 9 lifts, 6 security checks, and about 8 hours to get up here, but gee, it is worth it because the view is spectacular. And it's almost as good as the company, which kicks off with a very good friend of mine, somebody who eats 11 meals a day at restaurants around the country. I'm not sure he's the Cape Town foodie now. He seems to be down there half of his time. But we'll call him the Joburg Foodie for now. Steve, welcome.
Dan, always a pleasure. Great to be on the
now
show.
I learned about this space because I read your stuff on Wanted Online, normally with a great sense of envy because you get to go to all this cool stuff before I've even heard of it. And this was somewhere, I think you were sitting here, there appeared to be a helicopter and a safe and theatrics and the kind of thing that's your day-to-day.
Yeah, it was a pretty normal Thursday morning, I have to say. And they airlifted a very mysterious box all the way up here. And it was dropped off, and it was from the guys at Möet and Chandon. And it was I don't know if I should say, or if we'll show it to everyone later.
Let's hang on, because
keep it a secret.
There is something really cool. Look, you might have seen it already on social media, but if not, we'll send Steve off to have a look at it. You know the food and wine scene better than anybody in this city. And it's something that's always surprised me, because if I look at my travels around the world, I look at places like Altitude in Hong Kong. I've been to a great bar up the top of a building in San Francisco. They've got about 300 of them in New York. The rooftop bar in the big cities around the world is just such a feature. And yet in Johannesburg, it's not something we've really got a head around. And then I arrive up here, and actually, as I'm looking now, I can see someone parking their car in Botswana. This is just extraordinary. And it's just such a welcome addition to our Joburg skyline in every sense.
I couldn't agree more. I think Joburg is really starting to raise our profile as a food and wine destination. And it's very unique to how the city responds to such spaces. And I think, we're here, we can see the whole of Joburg. What I love is that you can kind of see a full circle around and where the city actually starts. And it's glamorous and it's luxurious and there's beautiful food and wine. So yeah, it's a perfect Joburg spot.
Let's talk about a big part of what you do, which is celebrate Johannesburg. Cape Town very gleefully owns the food and wine space in South Africa, and not without reason, because it's great chefs, it's a great space. Johannesburg tends to be that second cousin that doesn't get quite the same attention. What does this kind of space do to change that a little and to make people see a slightly different side of the city?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily about changing it, because I think Joburg will never really compete with Cape Town on that food level, just because of what each different market demands. But I think what Joburg does like is beautiful big spaces, over the top, a bit of glamour. We work hard the whole day to come somewhere beautiful at night, and I think that's where Joburg really is starting to shine, is rather than mimicking what's working in Cape Town, which has been tried and then failed for years and years and years. We really are embracing our own type of culinary identity. And is it necessarily completely about food? Maybe not, but it definitely is about going out. It's about the art of going out, and I think that really is where Joburg has it nailed.
And it's about defining your city on its own terms. And I think Joburg defining itself on Joburg's terms rather than Cape Town's is so 100%. Important. This is a nice step in that direction. Before we send you off, because you've got a busy evening with us here, off to see this mysterious thing we can't talk about just yet, and also try some of the food. A little word on champagne, because I know you bath in the stuff. You're that high-end in luxury. It's not really a case of Cup Classique versus champagne. Certainly I don't feel so. We make Cup Classique that I think is exceptional. Now, stuff at the top end, the best stuff from people like Peter Ferreira, from the guys who really make great Cup Classique, can give a really good French stuff run for its money. It's more about, you've got that sense of heritage and tradition of France, and they can sit alongside each other. And one night it's great to have a bottle of bubbles from Jean René or Paul René. The next night it's great to have something from one of the great French houses.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think it doesn't have to be an either or. I think, as you say, there's room for both. And it is Champagne Day tomorrow. Always say it's the most wonderful time of the year.
Christmas for the Joburg Foodie.
Yeah, Christmas for the Joburg Foodie. But I do think, champagne has got history. It's a legacy, and it's almost where all of this started. So I think that's something that does deserve to be celebrated in its own right. As does our phenomenal Cape Classique scene, which has just turned 50. So if if we're talking today, and I'm going to go on about random boring facts about Champagne, but Champagne has got 180 years worth of facts of how the weather has been basically on the hour every hour for all those years. And that plays a part in winemaking, and I think it's a sign of where we could be perhaps in another 130 years.
And we shall be there to tell the story. If you want an idea of just how good champagne is for you, Steve has a glass every single morning, and he turned 82 last month, so clearly it works for you. Stephen, I'm going to let you set off because you've got some work to do, both with this mysterious box, but also some food here at Alto 234.
Super hard work, but
I shall send you on your way in a very unusually monochromatic black outfit. Grab your glass and away you go. And while Steve makes his way, just to let you know who's joining us in just a moment, we've got a guy called Rob, who you'll recognize from various covers of Men's Health. And we've also got all the way from France, Emmanuel from Chandon and Lanson, who is a great fan of South Africa, so talking a bit about champagne. Before we do that, Steve, if I can decant you, and we're going to welcome in the guy who he almost built this single-handedly, really. He was in overalls, down to his waist, putting bricks and mortar in. Jamie Henry, pop that on if you will. And not just welcome, but welcome to one hell of a spot. It's my first visit here, and I've seen the pictures, and the pictures look pretty good. And I thought this is going to be quite nice. I'm going to quite enjoy it. I have to say, and I've been to a lot of rooftop bars around the world, this blows me away. This is magnificent.
Well, Dan, I think you've arrived.
Tell me a little bit about the history of this. This is the Leonardo Building. It's the heart of Sandton. Give me the story behind it.
It's the Leonardo Building. Essentially, we within the Legacy Group, we set out to. There was a hole in the ground here for many, many years, and with our partnership through Nedbank, they got in touch and asked us if there was something that we thought that we could do with the hole. And we developed the Leonardo. It was a staged development, and it grew as the market demand grew for the space. And we started off with a much shorter building, but we did design the foundations for what we're sitting at the moment.
So I'm okay.
Someone had,
top.
no, absolutely, right. But I think we had an idea all along, and I think we've now finished up, and we're here at Alto Bar, and it's absolutely amazing. And I think it's it superseded all our expectations of what it could have been.
Yeah, I mentioned to Steve, I've spent time in rooftop bars around the world, and I love them because it just gives you that sense of perspective on a city, and we just really haven't had that in Johannesburg before.
No, absolutely, and I think one of the things that Steve was saying as well about Johannesburg getting its own identity with food as well. I think we are starting to develop spaces that are about entertainment, about having entertainment, linked with food, and spaces that are just so covered with emotion that it's a night out, not a meal, And I think that's what we've tried to do here at the Leonardo. But I think traditionally, and also if you look back at the history of the Legacy Group, we've always tried to create, the ultimate lifestyle destinations, and we're very proud of this one.
I look at and I'm seeing this greater sweep of Gauteng, and there's somebody on the beach in Mozambique, and I can see somebody in Harare just waving hello. You've opened this. The economy is in downturn. We're in the middle of a pandemic. The world's upside down. It's the worst, daftest time possible to do something. And yet here you are. You've given us something to smile about and to enjoy and to laugh about.
Yeah, well, we never said we weren't crazy.
You proved it.
So, and I think, it's sometimes in the hardest times when the greatest developments are founded. And, it gives people something, like you say, to smile about, to be proud about as well. And, to change your skyline and, give the people of Johannesburg something to point at and be proud of again. So, like I said, we're also very proud. And
to do something with a glass in hand, we've got Emmanuel who's going to be joining us in just a moment from Chandon and Lanson in France. We've also got Rob from Möet Chandon. both of them experts in the field of champagne, and this just screams out Glass of Bubbles because it's just got that feel. This is where you're filming your great R&B music video. This is where you're kicking back with your army of models. It's just got that feel to it, doesn't it?
Where are they? Are they here?
It's shortly.
Okay. No, it's exactly that, and it's about the emotion of the space, I think, and I think when we never sort of envisaged having a bar at the top of the building, it was always an idea, but I think once we got here and we got up to the rooftop of the building, it wasn't going to be anything else, and it screams Bubbles, it really, really does. And what we have done is we've created the space that so there's a huge link to champagne. There's a huge Cap Classique offering here at the bar, and premium tapas, bar snacks, that kind of thing, because eating's cheating, as you know. But also through Palo Santo, we've created an incredible restaurant on level 7 called Aurum, and we do very, very much encourage anyone who visits Alto, either before or after, do yourself a favor and book in at Aurum as well. Have yourself a full meal. So
which leads me to my final question before you head off your 9th bottle of champagne of the day, because you're very committed to the Bubbles.
I'm nervous.
People are watching this. They're sitting here, maybe in Johannesburg, maybe they're sitting in Cape Town, maybe they're sitting in France. Emmanuel's thinking, I'd love to come and visit here. What do you have to do to get here? Do you need membership cards? Do you need secret passwords? How do you get into Alto? How do you come up here and have a glass of champagne?
No, none of that. You just phone, you book. You get on the website and you book and you come. And it's as easy as that.
There we go. I love that.
So, yeah.
It's a champagne socialism. Everybody's welcome.
100%.
Jamie, it's a great spot. I love it. I'm afraid you're going to see rather a lot of me here because I've taken a bit of a shining to it.
That's all right, Dan. We like you.
But thank you so much for having us here today. We're going to be drinking plenty of champagne. And again, I can't reveal it just yet, but you've got something very cool and exciting. Wait till you see. You're going to see us in a few moments. Jamie, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the evening. And enjoy Champagne Day tomorrow.
We'll do. All right.
And
not Saturday morning.
So Jamie Henry, who's the Legacy Group's Global Head of Champagne. I think that was on his business card. Lovely to have him with us and joining us on the show. Right, we've set the scene. We know where we are. We know who is with us. So let's get into the champagne. And as our model joins us, let me head over to France and say a very warm welcome to Emmanuel from Champagne Lonzon. Emmanuel, before we even talk about Bubbles, talk about champagne, tell me a little bit about South Africa, because I know it's a country that's very close to your heart.
Yes, it is definitely, Dan. It has been always a pleasure to come to South Africa and to visit South Africa, obviously. I think I've been maybe 10 times in South Africa, visiting Johannesburg, visiting Pretoria, or Cape Town. It's always a pleasure to come to your country.
And we love having you here. We love drinking champagne with you. And we're able to drink some champagne, albeit virtually, because I have some Lonzon here. I've also got some Möet Chandon, which allows me to introduce our other champagne expert. Robert, a warm welcome to you. Möet Chandon's got a really special place in the heart of Alto 234. And we're going to be talking about two houses tonight, about Lonzon, about Möet Chandon. And I think for so many people here in South Africa, Möet Chandon is such a household name. We know it so well, but we probably don't know too much of it beyond just it's a cool label. Roger Federer drinks it to win Wimbledon, and we see it everywhere. Give us, before we get the history of Lonzon, give us a little bit of the history of Möet Chandon.
Well, first of all, Dan, thank you so much. This is a fantastic opportunity. And Emmanuel, very nice to meet you, albeit telephonically. Look forward to the day that I get to meet you. But yeah, so, I mean, a lot of, like you say, it's a household brand. It is the world's most loved champagne, so it is quite out there. But, it really is the champagne of success and glamour since 1743. So it's got over 270 odd years worth of history and development. So it's so much more than just bubbles in the glass, to summarize what the brand is, really.
You also, as you mentioned, bubbles, we talked about Cup Classique a little earlier, and we're very, very clear on this on Dan Really Likes Wine. It's not one versus the other. It's sitting together. And I see Gerard Holden from Holden Manstein in Franschhoek. I like to think of them as two different drinks. Both can be low and high quality, and both have their time and place, although Winston Churchill got it right for me. There's a magnum of Paul Roger waiting for you there, I'm sure. Mr. Holden, Josephine Prieur, who joins us from Burgundy. Looks just fantastic, but could we see the view? We're going to be showing it to you in just a moment, don't worry. And then Reginald Beckler, Dan, you have a fun way of describing Josie like the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Interesting tete-a-tete. Cheers. It really is like the Burj Khalifa. We've got a little bit of a history there of Möet Chandon. Emmanuel, give us a little bit of the history of the House of Lonzon, if you will.
Yeah, thank you, with pleasure. So Lonzon has been created in 1760, so just after Möet Chandon, 1743, as our friend said. So one of the oldest house of Champagne, one of the few created before the French Revolution. It's still family-owned. 6 generations of Lonzon, six gentlemen have been running the company from 1760 to a couple of years ago. And it's still family-run, family management, family company. It's quite important, family and the commitment through our customers to be reliable to our customers. We are very reliable at Lonzon, and for your information, we have an association, let's say, with Wimbledon, knowing that we are the official sponsor of Wimbledon, official partner, let's say, since 47 years. So as you can see, it's a very, very long run, very long association. As we did, by the way, with Great Domain, which is a Lonzon importer in South Africa. We have a partnership with Great Domain, Lonzon importer in South Africa since more than 10 years.
And in terms of what you produce there, the area, I think most South Africans, Emmanuel, have got an idea of champagne as what's in a bottle. But in terms of where you are and what that history, that culture around champagne is, just for us South African viewers in particular, we don't really know the Champagne area. Give us a sense of how that works, where you are, and what your culture and community is like.
Okay, so Champagne is a northern part of France. It's not far from Paris. It's just 130 kilos northeast of Paris. It's a small area. It's only 1/3 of Bordeaux. It's only 3,300,000 kilometers. So it's quite small. Northern part of France, so we could have some cool weather, even if we could also have some hot period during the summer. And we've got a lot of slopes. The landscape, it's not flat, it's obviously slopes with some vineyards. It's a beautiful place, Dan. You should come and visit us.
Okay, consider me on your guest list, and the sooner I can get there, the better. I want to explore all of Champagne. I want to explore all of France. I really want to get over there. And if I can't get there myself, I'm able to, through wines like yourself, Emmanuel, through wines like Rob's, drink it here in South Africa. And it really is a gateway to that concept of champagne, that idea of this luxury that you guys have. And when I look at Möet Chandon, immediately it's what I think of, luxury. But yet I also know just how big you are. I've never been to a duty-free which doesn't have 6 acres of Möet Chandon there. So how do you guys manage as a brand to be so good, because you are, and I've drunk plenty of what you produce, and yet at the same time operate on the scale that you do?
I think that is probably one of the most difficult things that we have to achieve every single year, because every time you drink our non-vintage champagnes, it tastes exactly the same, despite the differences in harvest and circumstances in terms of climate. So there's many different contributing factors. One of them is we have a team of 10 winemakers. So every year they sample 800 different base wines, and these base wines give us a nice canvas to produce something that tastes exactly the same every single year. But really, I think what gives us the ability to make something quite consistent in our Möet Chandon Imperial, which is obviously our hero brand, is that we have over 234 crews that we have access to. So these are the villages that our wine produces. Our estate is over 1,190 hectares large. So, between our estate and these 234 villages or crews, as we call it, we are able to get quite a diverse selection of grapes. And ever since blending of champagne became the norm. This is absolutely key to create consistency.
It also leads to the question of vintage versus non-vintage, and we'll talk about that in a moment with some tasting. We're going to taste the Lonzon as well. But right now, we chatted a little earlier to the Joburg Foodie, Mr. Steve Steinfeld, and we've been speaking for the last while about this mystery addition to Alto 234. What is it? What did they bring in here by helicopter that is so incredibly cool and that now sits as the heartbeat of this particular spot at the top of the building? Well, let's go over to Steve Steinfeld. Steve, I think you've got a bit of a view there. Where are you and what do you have to show us?
Yeah, Dan, it is decidedly not a bad way to spend the afternoon. Look at this, as I was saying, 360-degree views of Joburg. It is absolutely magnificent. And yeah, I think it's just a perfect place to enjoy a glass of bubbles this Champagne Day's Eve. But now we're going to go and show you some...
There's your view, Steve. Take me down. I'm not even going to tell you what it is. You tell me. Take us down to this mystery addition to Alto 234 and how it works.
Yeah, so we're going to go show you the device, the machine that was delivered by a helicopter to the top of the Leonardo. And what it is it the Möet mini machine. Now, I think, the only thing wrong about this machine is that it's not at my house, but it is so much fun. And I'm going to show you how it works. So you take a little token. We're going to go... And it fetches the mini Möet bottle and drops it off right for you. So yeah, that is pretty cool. I'm going to come up.
That's just so ridiculously cool. And in fact, I've got one from a little earlier, which I'm going to try. Who came up with this? This is brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fantastic. And we were looking for a home for this innovation to kind of rest. And the fact that we are on top of an innovation itself, we found that Alto was the perfect place or perfect home for this innovation. Absolutely, such a great fit up here.
And what I'm drinking here, just bring it back to Emmanuel and some Lonzon, it's so cool. It looks slightly quirky, slightly gimmicky. So is the stuff in here the same as what I'm drinking regularly?
Absolutely, yeah. So the way champagne is made, it has to be fermented inside the bottle. However, keeping millions of 200 ml bottles inside of our 28 kilometers of cellars would be impractical. So what we do is we would decant the larger units, the 750 ml bottles, into those bottles. So the liquid in there is identical to the stuff that you would drink in the normal bottle of Möet Chandon Imperial.
Oh, it is. It's a really cool addition to Alto 234, to the champagne experience. And I'm rather enjoying that. Well done, Steve. Thank you for that. We're going to go back to Steve in a moment for some of the food. Let's head back now, though, to France and to Emmanuel at Lonzon. Emmanuel, give us the sense. We've got here in Möet Chandon just a really big, really all-encompassing brand that's been so successful around the world. I know Lonzon's a little different. What is your philosophy? What's your approach as a house to the art of champagne?
Yeah, as a house, as Lonzon, our tagline is "It's all about love." It means that at Lonzon we share the good moments. It's a double proof of love of the job well done to craft a very good champagne, one of the best champagne, and to love the others, to love your relatives. That's why our tagline is "It's all about love," and our value is openness to the world, kindness at heart, humility facing nature, authenticity, shaping the time, and elegance. Elegance of our wines, elegance of our partners, elegance of our wine, of our wine growers, elegance, let's say, in general.
And when we look at the wine, and I've actually got some right here, so I have a little taste. So I'll get you to talk us through the wine in particular in a second. But just more broadly speaking, in terms of what you're doing, what you're creating with champagne, and the story that you tell, link that in for me with the history of Lonzon and with what you're making. If somebody's picking up a glass of Lonzon for the very first time anywhere in the world, what would you like them to be thinking, to be feeling, to be getting the emotion of as they have this first glass?
Well, it's Lonzon Black Label, which is a brut non-vintage. It's a wine which is fresh and elegant. Very fresh with a very good upfront acidity. You can feel some citrus, some grapefruit with a long length, with a mild acidity and plenty of vitality. At Lonzon, we've got a specific process, which is to keep the traditional method, to avoid what we call the malolactic fermentation. I won't be too technical. I don't want to bore you, but usually in Champagne, you've got 3 fermentation. With Lonzon, we've got only 2. And by the way, we keep better freshness, fruitiness, and long aging capacity.
And you've given me a glass. We're going to talk about in a moment. We've done that already. It's exactly what you say, and it's a bottle I'm going to bring into picture in just a moment. In terms of the broader range, Emmanuel, where does this sit? What else does Lonzon do? What is this particular bottle's positioning in the greater Lonzon family?
So if we are talking about the range, we've got the Brut, we've got the Rosé, we've got the Blanc de Blanc, we've got some vintage. The Lonzon vintage and essentially the back vintage of Lonzon are very famous. We've got a full collection of old vintages dated back 1976 available for sale. But then if you come to France, if you come to Reims, to our cellar, we will be happy to even test some back vintage, which are even more older, which are older than 1976. The oldest one is 1904. So I hope you can come one day.
One day. I'm hoping to come many days, and I might bring Rob with me. I think.
What is it? 1904 champagne.
I am there. In fact, I'm seeing here we've got 1760, which speaks to when you come from, and that leads. I'm about to try both the non-vintage and the vintage here with Rob. Just an understanding, Emmanuel, for people here in South Africa. Non-vintage is what we drink most of, but the actual vintage, just give people an understanding of the difference between those two and what you do as Lonzon with your vintages that make them really special.
Yeah. So the main difference between brut, non-vintage, and vintage is easy to understand. This is the harvest. This is the current harvest. And you could have a vintage if you have some good condition, a good climate, nearly every 2-3 years. For instance, at Lonzon, like in many serious houses, we have some vintage nearly, depending, 2, 3, 4 years maximum. It's just impossible to have some vintage every year, depending of the quality and depending of the capacity, having enough grapes in order to have a vintage. A brut non-vintage, it's a blend of a harvest, the last harvest, with some other harvest, what we call the reserve wines coming from the previous years. At Lonzon, we've got an access to more than 100 cru villages, and we blend between 10 and 15 reserve wine coming from 10 and 15 harvest in order to create our brut non-vintage. For a vintage, it's just 1 year. But I can tell you then that we are not going to select the last harvest, which was in 2021, so this year, because we had a lot of hail, frost, and a lot of disease. So I'm afraid in Champagne in general, 2021 will not be a vintage.
The challenges one has in the world of champagne. Vintage is a huge thing with you guys because I see, as I said earlier, every airport in the world's got so much stuff, but we see it everywhere. And you've done something which is quite unusual with luxury, and you made it both ubiquitous is a strong term, but Möet Chandon is everywhere, and yet is still sought after. And you've got that balance really well, and yet you still have the vintage as well. We've got both of them here. So I'm going to start with my glass of the non-vintage, and just give us the comparative analysis, non-vintage versus vintage. People are drinking them. What are the differences? What is the story behind the two?
Well, okay, so yeah, pretty much alluding to exactly what Emmanuel was saying. Vintage is produced every single year despite the changing conditions. A vintage champagne, in our case, will only be made in a year with an interesting story to tell. So today we are drinking vintage 2012, and basically this year was quite a frightening year for a lot of winemakers in Champagne. A lot of people were actually frightened off from making a vintage in this particular year, and that's because for the first 90% of the year it was way too cold. It actually had lots of hailstorms, lots of frost, so that scared a lot of winemakers away. But the last 2 months were really saved by quite warm springs, so the grapes were able to ripen at a steady rate, which is perfect for champagne. So much so that a vintage that was almost destroyed and almost not worth using became one of the most legendary harvests ever. For example, according to critics, the Pinot Noir in this particular blend, so we use 3 grapes in Champagne, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. The Pinot Noir in here is apparently, according to this particular critic, some of the best Pinot Noir he's had since the 1950s. So it is really quite a special release. But the major difference as well, for non-vintage champagne by law, you only have to mature it or let it lie on the lees inside the cellars for 15 months. With the vintage champagne, we double that to 3 years. And in this particular case, with this one, we've put it in the cellars for about 5 to 6 years. So basically what happens is the bead or the effervescence becomes smaller, and the color usually becomes darker than the normal non-vintage ones. But today I thought of bringing a Magnum, and that's changed the color completely. So it kind of has messed with the colors there. You can't really see the difference, but they're very close. Yeah.
In just a moment, we're going to nip over back to the Joburg Foodie, who's got some food with him, because I think champagne and food is a space we don't talk about enough. And I want to get Emmanuel's thoughts about that as well in a moment. But just in terms of these, we often think, for instance, 2015 Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon. Let's buy every bottle we can because we know it's amazing vintage. It's going to be incredible wine. Does the same apply to a particular vintage of champagne? We should be looking to that year. If you can get hold of it, sell your children on the internet and buy a couple of cases.
I think each house has got a different story to tell. Some might say, yes, this is the vintage that you must just go, sell your house, go and buy more Magnums of this. I think, and I'm sure Lanzon's the exact same. We won't produce a champagne or a vintage champagne if the vintage doesn't have certain characteristics. So the quality is always going to be there despite the vintage. So I think anyone is worth buying. 2012, though, I must be honest, I'm a little bit biased. I do really enjoy this one. But that being said, Dom Perignon 1998 for me is still one of my favorite vintages ever. So if I see that in the bottle stores, I start taking off my shoes and offering that around to see if anyone would buy it. I can buy that bottle of champagne.
I've got no idea what a 98 Dom Perignon would cost, but I suspect you'll need to sell a small country and a couple of yachts to get there. Let's head over to Joburg Foodie, because it leads into what I think is a really important conversation about bubbles, and that is its space in the grander realm of food. Nobody knows food better than Mr. Foodie. Stephen, you've got some food with you. Tell us what you've got and why it goes so well with the bubbles you have beside you.
Yeah, I think champagne is a very underrated food wine. And I think a lot of people think, oh, it's the welcome drink, and then it's forgotten for the rest of the meal. And it actually does offer a whole lot of versatility when it comes to food pairing. So I've got a whole lot of Alto Bar snacks here that I think, at least, that will pair really well with champagne. I think, champagne and oysters, kind of a really classic combination. And it's actually really interesting because a study from the University of Copenhagen actually found that the oysters and the champagne spark an umaminess between one another, which I think is super cool. It's that savoriness that is the fifth flavor. And it kind of explains why they do go so well together, aside from the obvious, beautiful, vibrant, fresh bubbles. Oysters taste like the ocean, pretty standard pairing, but at least there's science behind it as well. And then I think another classic one is obviously salmon. So we've got a cured salmon over here, a bit of beetroot, a bit of radish. And again, I think what's really cool about this pairing is, if you go into main courses, you could then start using salmon too. In this case, with it being raw, the freshness and acidity really cuts through the fattiness of the salmon. And the cured part of the salmon obviously complements the vibrancy of the champagne. Then I've got two probably left off center pairings that you may go for. The one is, some nuts, salted nuts, or some even French fries, I think make a fantastic champagne pairing. And that's because the saltiness and crunch of the nuts really does play wonderfully off the freshness and the acidity and the beautiful bubbles of the champagne. So very underrated pairing. Next time, Dan, I know you're a big fan of Spur. Head over and get a, bottle of champagne with your side of fries.
Only the Joburg Foodie would have oysters and seared salmon and tell you it's a bar snack. I'm thinking pork scratchings and a bit of biltong. Completely different. Emmanuel, food and champagne. It's a space where in South Africa, whether it's champagne or Cup Classique, we tend to think of it as an aperitif, or it's a glass in celebration of it's somebody's birthday or somebody's had an occasion to celebrate. We don't tend to look at it as a food and wine pairing nearly as much as we should. Is that the same in France? Is it not? And then from there, your thoughts on champagne and food coming together?
Yeah, Dan. Well, the thing is that don't think that in France we are drinking champagne every day. I'm afraid we are drinking champagne, let's say once a week or once a month, depending on the area. But yes, obviously champagne is great for aperitif, highly appreciated, whether it could be a brut or it could be a rosé. But if we are talking food pairing, I think more and more the people on a worldwide basis, not only France, they really like to appreciate champagne at the exception of aperitif. Meaning, for instance, for brut non-vintage, as Steve just mentioned, you can have some oysters, you can have some scampi, some seafood. That's great. For the rosé, you can have some association, which is the case in the US, usually with some salmon, with some fish. And then with the vintage, because we've been talking about the Möet 2012 or the Lonzon 2009, Lonzon vintage, you could have some game food, some pheasant, some rabbit. So there is a lot of possibilities. You just have to choose, Dan.
You're giving us some terrific options. If I'm coming to you, I'm going to be very personal here, Emmanuel. I'm arriving. I phone you. I've just arrived. I'm coming to you to Champagne. I'm coming to your house for dinner. You've got some of your best House of Lonzon champagne waiting for me. What for you? What makes a really good food and wine pairing that you think is just absolutely fantastic?
Okay, in my case, what I really like is a Lonzon vintage with a cheese, an old Comté cheese, which is just perfect. You should taste, my dear.
Consider me sold when I come through there. I'd also just like to get a sense of if I'm coming to Champagne. I think for many people in this part of the world, we think of a wine tour de France. Initially, Burgundy and Bordeaux come to mind, but then the Champagne region comes to mind as not a lesser thought, but the immediate ones, the red wines. And then, oh, hang on, Champagne's in France as well. If I'm coming over, what are your recommendations in terms of seeing the Champagne area, understanding it, getting the best out of it as a food and wine tourist?
Yeah, I have to tell you that what we call the tourism is really increasing. It's flying in Champagne since the COVID obviously has dropped recently. So the best period for coming is during the spring, May, June, because the temperature is not so high. You've got a beautiful light, and you could have a look on the vineyards, obviously, on the slopes, on the various areas of Champagne, Montagne de Reims, Côte des Bars, Côte des Blancs, the Chardonnay area. And on top of that, you can come during the harvest, obviously, which is late August, beginning of September. So you can see, the people into the fields during the harvest, handpicking only, obviously. So I think it's two really cool periods for coming, spring and late August.
All right, I'm just working on my diary here quickly, just putting those dates in. There we go. So we know we can come. Basically, Emmanuel's just invited all of South Africa
100%.
to come and stay with him with their families for weeks on end. What about Möet Chandon? Like it's a slightly intimidating brand as well. It's Roger Federer. It's famous as well. Can one actually go and taste it, Möet Chandon? Is it accessible?
So I mean, yeah, there's honestly, if you go there, there's no shortage of places that you'll go. It's just every turn you take, it's just wow. You can go and visit Möet Chandon. In fact, I was very lucky to actually have dinner inside the cellars, and it's amazing because they're about 30 meters below ground, 28 kilometers long, which is just mind-blowing.
You said that earlier. I thought you were making that up. Is that true?
It's the longest. Yeah. So there's what they call the Avenue de Champagne, and it is just there's a super long. Mercier, which is one of our champagne brands, actually held a world rally stage inside of the cellars.
No,
which is absolutely mind-blowing. But there is so much to see there. But we had dinner inside the cellars, and while you're busy eating, because the cellars are just full of chalk, obviously keeping all that water in, you just constantly feel a little drip on your head for water landing on your head. So it's an absolutely magical place. And even if you're not there for the champagne, the Notre Dame de Reims is absolutely breathtaking. It's I actually can't explain it to you. If I didn't have this jacket on, you would see goosebumps from head to toe. But you see bullet holes in the walls at Veuve Clicquot from World War II kind of thing. So when you step in France as a South African, you don't quite understand the history that you are actually talking about. It's very different when you come here. I mean, we're quite a relatively young nation in that sort of sense, but champagne is phenomenal. But yes, to answer your question, you can go and visit Möet Chandon, and you can have a glass of champagne and explore a small portion of the 28 kilometers of cellars.
And clearly, from what you say, from your very emotional recollection, as somebody who's spent a lot of time in South African vineyards, I've got no doubt, get an experience of not necessarily better or worse than South Africa, just something that's so vividly different.
Just different, absolutely. Yeah, I still have a very deep passion for all the South African ones as well. But there's something special about seeing, when you go to Orvilliers Abbey, where Dom Perignon stumbled across the sparkling wine at the time, or the devil's wine as they called it there at the time. When you go into that abbey and you see his gravestone in there, it's unlike anything that we have to compare it to in South Africa. It is really a special place. So Dan, I would highly recommend going to France as soon as you can.
All right, Rob and I are leaving on Monday. We're coming to stay with you, Emmanuel. We can't wait to get over there. Emmanuel, in terms of where you are, you guys have got, as you've made very clear, a house with so much history, so much passion, such a rich heritage of making bubbles of the very, very highest order. It almost seems wrong of me to ask you what's in the future, given that your history is so rich. But I know that none of you as houses stay stagnant. You're always looking to what you can do to continue the journey. For the House of Lonzon, for you guys, what is the future? What are you looking to do going forward as a champagne?
Yeah, the future, Dan, the future of champagne is quite clear. Whatever it could be for Lonzon and for the other House of Lonzon, but also for the wine growers, the little wine growers, is to move into biodynamic, to organic. We need to go step by step, because this is a long process, in order to change our habits, to avoid pesticides, to avoid herbicides, and to be more and more organic, in order to be, at the end, biodynamic, which is really the top of the viticulture, which is obviously extremely demanding, because it's quite costly. You can be badly affected by hail, frost, disease, whatever it could be, the mildew, the odium, the botrytis. Sorry for these strange names. But let's be clear, this is really the direction for the future, to improve the quality of the grapes, to be trying to be more and more greeny, going to the biodynamic objective for the land.
It's such an exciting space that you guys work in, because it's history and future and present all coming together, and it makes for just such a wonderful space. And the beneficiaries, as I say on this show so often, are those of us who get to drink it. I see there's a comment coming through from my dear mother, who's sitting in Belfast in Northern Ireland. He drinks about 11 bottles of wine a day. Dan, you'll remember your childhood Christmas breakfast, champagne and smoked salmon or oysters. My ordering methods have just been validated. Well, I'll let the rest of you be the judge of that. I want to get a final comment, Rob, from both you and from Emmanuel on this world of champagne. Before I do that, let me head back to Mr. Foodie and to Steve, who's been such a great guest, as he so often is on the show. Steve is somebody who eats and drinks so much and should be the size of a small building, but instead looks like a Kenyan long-distance runner with a ponytail and a rather poorly crafted goatee. What are your thoughts here on champagne in the South African context? And people who are watching this thinking, yeah, maybe I haven't had so much. How should we be drinking it, approaching it, balancing it with our love of South African wine?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a category that is super exciting for the South African industry and market. It's definitely one that we're seeing growing in leaps and bounds, even throughout the pandemic. And I think it's something that shouldn't be, I mean, wine in general, like, just don't be afraid of it. It shouldn't be pretentious. It shouldn't be difficult. Drink what you like, try new things. And, you know, if it's champagne, it's really not that difficult. So, yeah, that would be my advice.
And there's a man who has gallons of it by the week. So you've got a good source of advice. Last one for you quickly, Emmanuel, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us. And I hope our next meeting, either in South Africa and France, is in person rather than virtually. But just for you, as you're speaking to, we've got a lot of guests from all over the world, and we've seen that this evening. People like Josephine sitting in Burgundy, but a lot of South Africans here who proudly drinking their cup classique, and I think loving and enjoying it, and drinking a wine that's still very young. We're only 50 years in to cup classique. What would your advice, and with no sense of being patronizing or condescending, it really is, you're from a champagne world which has got so much more history than we do here in South Africa of cup classique. What would your advice be to the people who are making cup classique here in South Africa 50 years in, going forward, to try and get the very best out of what we're doing?
Yeah. Okay. I think the good thing maybe for the young generation in South Africa is to start with the Cab Classic, method Cab Classic, which is exactly the same method as champagne, double fermentation into the bottle to start, because this is bubbles, because this is a wine category and you need to be educated into the wine category, and then slightly step by step moving to champagne. You can move to the growers, and then you can move to the really top houses like Möet, Chandon, like Lonzon, and some of the ones, obviously, which are available in South Africa, like Laurent Perrier or Tétanger. It could be my advice.
All right, it's advice you shall take to heart and pass on. And it's advice that I think is great, coming from somebody who knows so much about the art of champagne. You guys have also got a brand that has just got such a great imprint. Your final words, Rob, to our South African Cap Classique champagne bubbles lovers from the world of Möet Chandon, about just enjoying and getting the best out of this wonderful, wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll echo exactly what you've been saying the whole time. You know, they don't need to be compared. They're different. They're both fantastic. I think, you know, if you look at how far we've come in the 50 years and the quality that we've managed to produce in that short space of time is absolutely phenomenal. So, yeah, to all the guys out there, carry on doing what you do, because it's absolutely amazing. But yeah, from an advice point of view, I think they could teach me a thing or two. So.
Bottle of Cap Classique in one hand, bottle of champagne in the other,
exactly.
and away you go. Rob, thank you, because you've been our de facto host today. Alto 234 is a fabulous space. I know it's a home for Möet Chandon here in Johannesburg. The views are terrific, but the champagne's equally as good. So thank you for hosting us, and it's been a really, really great evening. Big thank you to Emmanuel, who's joined us all the way from the House of Lonzon and the team at Great Domains. And Emmanuel doesn't know this, but I'm arriving with 206 of my closest friends can stay at his house.
Welcome.
Merci bien, Emmanuel. But also a big thank you to all of you for tuning in and watching tonight and getting a chance to try some great champagne vicariously through us. Remember, tomorrow is Champagne Day, and it's really what we say about South African wine. It's not about finding a specific wine, a specific estate, a specific grape. It's about exploring, and it's about trying new stuff, and it's about finding stuff that you think has a certain resonance with you. And in the world of champagne, they've all got their nuances, they've all got their differences. Keep trying them, keep drinking them, try them alongside Cup Classique, and try them as two wines that are not exactly the same, but I think sit alongside each other really, really nicely. And sit alongside each other really nicely, 234 meters above the heart of Sandton. I see Paul Gerber from down in the Franschhoek area is saying hello, Mr. Alchemy. Congrats, awesome Bubbles program. Do explore Bubbles, explore wine. And if you're up in Joburg or if you're coming to visit, come and try 234 at Alto. It's a great place, great views. And there's a rather nice machine that dishes out some Möet Chandon as well. So a big thank you to Steve Steinfeld, the Joburg/Cape Town foodie, who's joined us this evening. He's a great friend of mine and knows his food and wine spectacularly. A big thank you to Rob and the Möet Chandon team. A big thank you to Emmanuel and the Great Domains team, to Jamie and to the team who've joined us here from the Legacy Group. Enjoy your Champagne Day tomorrow. And all you have to do, you can download it from the Dan Really Likes Wine website, your I Don't Need to Go to Work Because It's Champagne Day form, which is official, and you can spend the day drinking Bubbles instead. Please join us again next week, both on Monday and Thursday. We've got two very special shows celebrating the best of Chenin Blanc on South Africa. And we've also got some rather nice wine launches coming up from the heart of the Saxon Hotel. But for now, I've got rather a lot of champagne to finish, rather a lot of celebrating to do, and I've got to go and help the Joburg foodie with the 11 dozen oysters he's ordered on my account. Have a great evening. Enjoy the champagne. Thanks to everyone who's joined us. Cheers and goodbye.
Cheers.
To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.